I'm Jay, and this is my brother Logan.
We both have food allergies, just like Tad.
And we're still all fabulous.
Hi again, this is Alicia J. Path, in case this is the first day you're joining, and I am the author of If I Can't Eat Flies, What Am I? I'm here answering your questions. So today's question is, how did I meet Paula and why did I decide to ask her to be my illustrator? Well, this one I'm going to try to answer without getting emotional because up until this point, kindergarten for my son was not the best experience. Not because of the teachers. The teachers were great and tried as hard as they could, but because parents, believe it or not, were not too keen on having a child with food allergies in the classroom. They tended to focus far more on what they felt that forced their children to lose rather than caring about what that means to the food allergy child in the classroom. And we even had a couple of pretty nasty parent-teacher meetings. And I only tell you this because it will lead you up to understanding why Paula touched us so much. I particularly remember one night we left a parent-teacher meeting, and most people weren't this mean, but I just want to give you an example of what sometimes you can run into. But we leave this parent-teacher meeting, and I'm outside, and I'm trying to get all my kids into car seats, because at this point I have a kindergartner who's 5, and twins who are 4, and another child who's 3. And so I'm trying to get them all into the car, which any of you who have multiple young children know is not easy when you're talking about multiple car seats. Logan was still in a booster seat because he was so tiny. And this gentleman comes angrily storming up to the car and basically gets way too close to my personal space and has me trapped between him and the car with Logan next to me because he was always the last one in because he only needed a booster. And he starts yelling at me, like right in my face, like, how dare you demand that my kids have to miss out on bringing cupcakes into the classroom and all these other things that are just basically a rite of passage in life just because your child isn't strong enough to be around them. Have you ever heard of natural selection? I kid you not. Like, I kid you not. I still, to this day, yeah, remember emotional? Still to this day can remember how horrible that felt. It felt like being punched in the gut. Like I knew Logan was listening to every word, and he's a science geek. He totally knew what natural selection was. Sorry. So I'm looking at this man and I can't even believe he said it. And this is a man who proclaims to be a Christian man. And for the record, I didn't ask that kids never bring in food for birthdays. I just asked that the food be eaten and celebrated in the dining hall and not in the classroom. It was an all-day kindergarten. They were there the entire day in that classroom except for lunch. And if they celebrated birthdays with cupcakes at like 11 a.m., then my son was in danger the rest of the day. So all I asked is that if they sent it in, the food would have to be kept somewhere else and that the kids would have to go to the dining hall to celebrate and then come back to the classroom where my son could be safe. And you would have thought I asked for the world. So that was the kind of stuff I was dealing with. That was not the only, but it's the biggest. It's probably the meanest thing that was ever said to me. And by the way, it took me months to help Logan not feel like he was expendable or should be expendable at other people's expense. And I'm not so sure it probably ever left him. Maybe that's why sometimes he felt like he didn't want to speak up or felt like he was a burden, because that man definitely planted the idea. But anyway, so even though the teachers were kind and did their best, none of them really had gone out of their way to try to help Logan. They would exclude him from an activity if they weren't sure if it was safe, which thank you. Thank you, all teachers who do that. If you're not sure, thank you. Keep the kid out, right? I'm not complaining. And it's hard. You've got too many kids, right? Well, one day This is what I've been dealing with, and I get a phone call, and it's Paula, and she is the art teacher at this school. And she says to me, I feel so badly for your son because I'm doing a painting lesson, and I can tell he really wants to paint, but I don't think the paints are safe for him. So I've been having to have him sit at a different table, and he's just drawing with colored pencils. But I'd really like to include him. So I'm willing to buy paint that would be safe for him with my own money to take into the classroom so that he can do this lesson with everybody else. But I don't know what paints are safe. Could you help me? Can you like just imagine how that felt? Like how thankful I was as a mom that someone finally recognized how hard it is. Oop, see, told ya. Give me a second. For these kids. I mean, can you imagine being a kid and having to watch all the other kids have fun all the time? Painting, gluing, eating, celebrating, and you always have to sit on the outskirts and watch. You have to choose between joining in and trying to have that kind of fun or literally risking your life. And I know I've mentioned this before, but when you're a kid, you're supposed to feel like you're invincible. You're supposed to feel like you can do anything. That's why they put themselves in danger all the time, like fall out of 9-foot trees. And but when you're an allergy kid and you've been in the hospital struggling to breathe and struggling to stay alive multiple times because of something as common as food that everyone eats, you don't feel invincible. And you certainly don't feel like you belong or that you fit in. It's really, really hard. So, my biggest dream with this book is that it helps everyone understand how that can be, what that can be like, just a little bit more. And Paula, let me just say that I was a huge fan of hers from then on, not just because she is a freaking amazing artist. I've been in love with her ink and watercolor paintings since before I even knew she was the art teacher at that school, because I had seen her at the craft tent at our community festival every year. And she always had these really cute cards and different things. And her ink and watercolor technique is so cool and so whimsical to me, that I knew that day that I would always be her biggest fan. And then when I wrote that book, if you haven't listened to the previous answers, you might have to go back now. But in a few years, when something else happens at a different school that inspires this book, I instantly knew that's who I was going to ask to do it. And ironically, when I asked her, she got all emotional and said there has always been that one thing missing in her life because she always dreamed of illustrating a children's book. So I think it all came full circle. Nothing is a coincidence, and her act of kindness that has stuck with me to this day is what led to us writing this book and illustrating this book together.